Imagine a war that starts and ends in less time than it takes to watch an episode of your favorite show. It sounds impossible, right? But in 1896, one man's defiance against the massive British Empire lit the fuse on a conflict that was all over in just 38 minutes. This is the bizarre but true story of the Anglo-Zanzibar War, the shortest war in recorded history. So how on earth does a war wrap up in under an hour? To get it, we need to rewind to the late 19th century and travel to Zanzibar, a stunning island off the coast of East Africa, which is now part of Tanzania. Back then, Zanzibar wasn't just a pretty beach destination. It was a massively strategic hub for trade, sitting right on the shipping lanes between Europe and India. This was the height of the scramble for Africa, when European powers were busy carving up the continent for themselves. Britain and Germany were the big players in the region, and in 1890, they signed the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty. Germany got a tiny island in the North Sea and Britain got control over Zanzibar, declaring it a British protectorate. But for the British, this wasn't just about money. They were on a mission to abolish the profitable but horrifically brutal East African slave trade, and they needed a friendly local ruler to help push their agenda. So, while Zanzibar was technically independent, it was in name only. The British consul had to approve any new sultan, and that little detail, well, that was about to cause a very big problem. On August 25, 1896, the pro-British Sultan, Hamad bin Thawini, died suddenly. So suddenly that many suspected he was poisoned by his own cousin. Almost immediately, that cousin, Khalid bin Bargash, stormed the palace and declared himself the new sultan. Khalid was ambitious and had been overlooked for the throne before. He wasn't going to let it happen a second time. Just one tiny problem: he forgot to ask the British for permission. This was a direct slap in the face to the British Empire and a violation of their treaty. The British had their own guy in mind, Hamad bin Mohammed, who they knew would be much more cooperative on issues like, you guessed it, ending slavery. But Khalid refused to budge. He barricaded himself inside the royal palace, a grand building made mostly of wood, and rallied his supporters. He scraped together about 2,800 men, a mix of palace guards, armed citizens, and servants, plus a few artillery pieces. In the harbor, he had his entire navy, the royal yacht, which some sources call the HHS Glasgow, armed with a small cannon. Khalid was betting that the British wouldn't dare open fire. He was about to be proven very, very wrong. If you're fascinated by strange but true stories from the historical back alleys, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. We dive into wild events like this every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming up next. The British consul, Basil Cave, didn't waste any time. He sent Khalid an ultimatum: get out of the palace by 9 a.m. on August 27th, or else. Out in the harbor, the Royal Navy had assembled a fleet of 5 powerful warships, their guns aimed right at the palace. As the deadline crept closer, Khalid sent a defiant message saying, "We have no intention of hauling down our flag, and we do not believe you would open fire on us." Cave's reply was brutally clear: "We do not want to open fire, but unless you do as you are told, we shall certainly do so." At 9:00 a.m., time was up. 2 minutes later, at 9:02 a.m., the British warships unleashed hell. High explosive shells ripped through the wooden palace, and it almost instantly burst into flames. The Sultan's cannons were knocked out within minutes. In the harbor, the royal yacht bravely fired on a British cruiser. The cruiser fired back once and promptly sank the yacht in the shallow water. It wasn't a battle. It was a demolition. By 9:40 a.m., the Sultan's flag over the burning palace had been shot down, and the shelling stopped. The war was over. Some sources say it lasted up to 45 minutes, but the official time clocked in at just 38. The aftermath was just as one-sided as the fight. While only one British sailor was injured, an estimated 500 of the Sultan's fighters and civilians were killed or wounded, many in the fire that consumed the palace. And what about Sultan Khalid? He had fled the palace as soon as the shells started flying and took refuge in the nearby German consulate. The Germans later spirited him away to their territory in mainland Africa, and he lived the rest of his life in exile. The British, of course, installed their guy, Sultan Hamad bin Mohammed, who officially banned slavery in Zanzibar the following year. That incredibly short war marked the absolute end of Zanzibar's real independence and cemented British control over the island until 1963. It remains a stark, almost absurd footnote in history, a wild reminder of overwhelming colonial power and the day a war was won in less time than it takes to make lunch. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any other surprisingly short historical events. We'll see you in the next one.